Mr. Speaker, I will continue this after question period because we know we don't want to preempt question period. I don't want to go into any of that time as give full time allotment to question period. So I will continue right after question period. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member for Caribou Prince George for his cooperation, and he will have 8 minutes to continue his speech following question period. Statements, his riveting speech, as he says, indeed. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Nunavut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Government of Canada announced $1.6 million in funding to support the Kivadlik Hydrofiber Link. This project will significantly reduce Nunavut's dependency on fossil fuels and for the first time bring reliable internet connectivity to communities in the Kivadlik region. This represents a big step towards building a sustainable economy for Nunavut, and I was proud to be a part of that effort. But a sustainable economy also requires the kind of social service supports that most Canadians take for granted. In Nunavut, there is not one mental health addictions treatment facility, despite the fact that we have the highest suicide rate in Canada. Addictions are causing untold damage to families and communities, tearing at the very fabric of our society. It took Canada decades to get on board with the Hydrofiber Link project. I can only hope that they will recognize this urgent need and work with the government of Nunavut to make a mental health addictions treatment facility a reality.
The honourable member for Toronto Danforth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, I attended an open meeting hosted by family and friends of people who were injured or lost in a Danforth shooting. At that meeting, they shared a letter for the Prime Minister, and I would like to share part of it with this place. It reads in part, having taken some 7 months to grieve and consider what we should do to make a difference, we are urging that Canada follow the lead of other like-minded countries such as the UK, Japan and Australia and impose a ban on the private ownership of handguns and military-style assault rifles. We acknowledge that this action is not the only step that needs to be taken to stem gun violence. However, we believe that it will be impactful and effective as the results in other countries have shown. I want to thank Noor Sameh, Ken Price, Quinn Fallon, and Claire Smith for their advocacy, as well as members of the community, including the leadership of the Broadview Danforth BIA and the Greektown BIA. Thank you.
Well done.
Honourable member for Bow River.
Mr. Speaker, today I want to stand and recognize a great Canadian, the Director General of Encounters with Canada, Linda Brunet, who is here in Ottawa. Encounter is the largest student exchange program in Canada. Ms. Brunet has been the Director General of Encounter since 1999. Her leadership has made a real difference in the lives of over 100,000 young Canadians. As a volunteer for Encounters, I've seen firsthand the incredible work she is doing. Every year, thousands of youth are afforded the opportunity to visit the National Capital, learn about our Canadian institutions. Current members of the Parliament, including Calgary Nose Hill, Milton, Fredericton, Gatineau, Surrey Centre, Central Nova, Sturgeon River Parkland, are among the alumni of this great program. Ms. Brunet has been a pivotal in ensuring Encounter stays a dynamic, exciting experience for young Canadians. She announced she'll be retiring on March 1. I join generations of Canadians thanking Linda Brunet for her dedication to Encounters with Canada and wishing her all the best going forward.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Brome-Missisquoi. Mr. Speaker, water quality in our transborder lakes remains a major concern to my constituents in Brome-Missisquoi. We share two magnificent lakes with our American neighbours, Lake Champlain and Lake Memphremagog, one on each side of my riding. We're fortunate to have two organizations whose members devote a lot of their time and energy to protecting these two lakes. Memphremagog Conservation, under the direction of Robert Benoit, is there to protect Lake Memphremagog, particularly in connection with the Coventry landfill site in Vermont. 5 mayors from towns on Lake Champlain recently formed Action Lake Champlain, whose mission is to take the necessary steps to clean up the lake water. The mayor of Venise-en-Quebec, Jacques Landry, asked me to share these words. Lake Champlain is a source of great pride to the people of Venise-en-Quebec and the entire region. It attracts many tourists in the summer months, which contributes greatly to the vitality of the region. So it's imperative that we address the issue of water quality, especially since it's the source of Bedford and St. Armand's drinking water. Cleaning up this lake is a regional priority.
Last week, the Vancouver School Board released a facilities plan naming some 24 elementary and high schools that are in danger of being closed. This is the third time in 10 years that schools are at risk of being shut down, depriving thousands of students the opportunity to attend a quality school in their own neighborhood. Mr. Speaker, many of these schools are slated for closure because they are at high risk in an earthquake. British Columbia sits on seismically active areas, and the next major earthquake is only a matter of time. The federal government plays an important role in emergency preparedness and ensuring the public safety of all Canadians. And parents expect their government to take every precaution to keep our children safe. That's why the seismic needs of Vancouver schools must be a top priority for all levels of government, including this one. So today I am once again calling on the federal government to make funds available to help seismically upgrade BC schools so that every child can attend a school in their neighborhood and receive a quality education in safety.
The honourable member for Saint Jean. Mr. Speaker, an informed public ensures the integrity of the democratic institutions that shaped the Canada of today. As a government, we fully believe in the need to support news media. Regional news has always been a community development tool. That's why we should celebrate regional news providers who work day in, day out to allow Canadians their freedom of speech and of opinion. Today, I'd like to highlight the invaluable contribution of one individual in the riding of Saint Jean, my riding, for his role in regional news broadcasting. Mr. Éric Latour is a TV host in Haut-Richelieu. He's just done his show number 2000. Over his 30-year career in communications, Mr. Latour has always maintained the highest standards of openness and integrity. Congratulations and thank you, Eric.
The honourable member for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning I raised a flag on Parliament Hill in recognition of Rare Disease Day. The theme on this Rare Disease Day is bridging health and social care, bridging the gaps between medical, social, and support services for patients living with a rare disease and their families. Millions of Canadians, 2/3 of them children, are affected by one of over 7,000 rare diseases, and only 1 in 3 of these Canadians can access the treatments that they need. One of the hardest experiences a family can face is caring for a loved one with an incurable condition. My family has been affected by 2 rare disorders, including Alport syndrome and Pato syndrome, that, as you know, claimed the life of my youngest daughter last year, Lucy Rose. I invite all members to join me in recognizing Rare Disease Day and to champion the medical pioneers looking for treatments and to offer our support to reduce the stigma associated with a rare disorder. Show you're rare, show you care. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, Richmond Hill is a compassionate community that lifts up those at risk. We do not allow the marginalized to go unseen or unassisted. This past weekend, Mosaic Interfaith held its coldest night of the year fundraiser. This event raised over $43,000 to support homeless and at-risk people. Meanwhile, grade 6 slept over at TMS Lower School to experience a simulated night of homelessness. Tonight, for the 5th year in a row, I'll be joining 360 kids to take part in 360T experience, where we will spend the night in the street to experience firsthand what homeless youth endure. And tomorrow, Yellow Brick House will be holding its 14th annual gala, which raise money to support women and children escaping domestic violence. Richmond Hill's compassion and empathy are why I'm so proud to represent my community in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Nickelbelt.
Mr. Speaker, I want to recognize the inspirational work of Dr. Kevin McCormick, Honorary Colonel of the Irish Regiment of Canada. I want to salute Brigadier Nicholas Orr, the United Kingdom Defence and Military Advisor, Fondateur Initiative Canada.
Founder of the Crown and Canada Initiative and many other international projects, Mr. McCormick raises public awareness of the vital role of the Canadian Armed Forces. He has acquired thousands of historic items on his travels and donated them to museums and families.
Of Prince of Wales at Buckingham Palace and made a special donation to the Regiment Museum of Historical Military Scrolls and Artifacts from 1872. Mr. Speaker, through his selfless efforts, Honorary Colonel McCormick demonstrated distinguished service to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and promoting and educating a nation of the vital role that the Crown continues to hold in our country's rich history. Thank you, Honorary Colonel McCormick and Brigadier Nicholas Orr.
Honourable member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, I talked to a lot of people in my riding of Edmonton-Griesbach, and one thing is crystal clear. People are worried. They're worried because of the Prime Minister's out-of-control spending. They're worried because he's failed in his promise to balance the budget. They're worried because their children will be stuck with a tab for this. They know that this runaway train of spending makes life more expensive for all Canadians. And they know that more taxes are coming down the track. People in Edmonton-Griesbach tell me that life is already more expensive under these Liberals. Seniors especially feel the pinch when they're slapped with more and more taxes. We all know that today's deficits are tomorrow's taxes. But fear not. Our Conservative team, with our strong leader, will win the election this fall and stop this Liberal train wreck.
Good job. Honourable member for Coverdale, Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, I stand today to congratulate BC's Team Tardy, who successfully defended their title in the World Junior Curling Championships in Liverpool, Nova Scotia on February 23rd. Team Tardy now has 3 straight national and 2 straight world men's junior titles under their belts. Please join me in congratulating Team Tardy. Mr. Speaker, on a somber note, I would like to acknowledge the passing of a very well-known and respected Rotarian and community advocate of Langley, David Truman. David was a birder, golfer, friend, and avid curler. He was also a strong advocate for my entry into politics. My deepest condolences go out to his wife, Nora, and 2 sons, Douglas and Gregory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable member for Winnipeg South.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. In February, during Black History Month, we honor the legacy of Black Canadians. As it draws to a close, I would like to recognize some remarkable Black women from Canada's past and present, such as civil rights crusader Viola Densmond, trailblazing politician Rosemary Brown, and entrepreneur Anne Devine. Their contributions help advance gender equality and build a more inclusive Canada. Honoring the contributions of women and girls will continue next week, Mr. Speaker, on International Women's Day, when we celebrate the achievements of women and girls in the fields where they are underrepresented, including science, technology, engineering, and math. Mr. Speaker, we need women's voices in these fields to shape the innovations of the future. It benefits us all. It makes Canada more competitive. It drives our economy and grows our middle class. Mr. Speaker, we need to #innovate for change.
The honourable member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents in Oshawa, like all Canadians, are gravely concerned about the direction of this Liberal government's moral compass and ongoing mismanagement of our economy. As members know, the economic news for hardworking families in Oshawa has not been rosy over the past few months. But while thousands in my riding agonize over future job prospects, retraining supports, and their children's future, we see absolutely no sense of urgency from the Ministers of Industry, Finance, or even the Prime Minister himself. He didn't even bother to show up. Hardworking families in Oshawa and across our country desperately need immediate action on lower taxes, infrastructure, and immediate end to the unfair U.S. steel tariffs ravaging our industrial sector. Add in the uncertainty of a carbon tax and the future of Oshawa's port, you see why families are worried. Mr. Speaker, Canadian families need a government that works for them, not a protection racket in the PMO. It's time for conservative economic policies that will again make life more affordable for working families in Oshawa and across the country.
The honourable member for Pontiac.
Jean-Guy Whiteduck was elected chief of the Kitigan-Zibi Anishinabeg in 1976, and he led the community for 30 consecutive years until his resignation in 2006. He came back to lead this Algonquin community from 2015 until December 2018, when he resigned due to illness. Today, I'm paying tribute to Chief Whiteduck for his 40 years of public service so that this House of Commons might honor his career commitment to Kitigan-Zibi and the Algonquin Nation. He was devoted to Algonquin control over education, and now the KZ School has produced hundreds of graduates since 1980, children who became community leaders themselves. Chief Whiteduck staunchly supported the revival of the Algonquin language and culture, and he pursued the recognition of Indigenous rights and title everywhere on the Algonquin traditional territory on which this Parliament Hill sits in the heart of the Kitchissippi watershed. As Pontiac's MP, it's been an honor to work with Chief White Duck on the global settlement of Kitigan-Zibi's specific claims, and I trust we're going to have some good news to announce shortly. And even as he battles sickness, Chief White Duck's presence is felt because the Algonquin Nation runs in his blood. Miigwech Shogima Jean-Guy White Duck, Ki Neno, Wido Kazoyen, Undaje.
The honourable member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank all the wonderful constituents of Saskatoon West who participated in our recent citizen forum. Using a World Cafe method for our forum meant everyone's input was heard and honored, and together we decided on the most important recommendations for action. Support for universal basic income, better care for those living with HIV and AIDS, upholding Canada's duty to consult First Nations, eliminating barriers to post-secondary education, enshrining the right to housing in Canadian law, a $15 an hour minimum wage, and access for all for public transportation. As I promised, I have shared these recommendations and I have forwarded them in writing to the Prime Minister. I'd like to share a wonderful quote from one of the forum participants, which I think sums up the spirit of our discussions. Politicians should take the long view and not be afraid to be idealistic. People need to hope. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's punitive 2019 carbon tax is the latest in a list of growing Liberal failures. For no environmental gain, Canadians will be unfairly punished by this Prime Minister for heating their homes, commuting to work, driving the kids to hockey, or even buying groceries. The Prime Minister's carbon tax will add 11 cents to the price of every litre of gasoline and hundreds of dollars more per year for heating a home with natural gas. And that, Speaker, is just the beginning. The Prime Minister's carbon tax will go much higher, perhaps, as government documents hint, 15 times higher. That's bad news for struggling Canadians when they say they can at least afford it. In October, Canadians can choose to stop paying for Liberal failures and choose Conservative leadership to get ahead. Mr. Speaker, Canada's Conservatives are fighting for better.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Phelan-McDermott syndrome, mutation of the SPATN1 gene. Mr. Speaker, these, like many others, are rare diseases. By definition, each of them affects fewer than 1 in 2,000 individuals, but those individuals have names like Jesse, Lorena, and Isabella. My own nephew Ethan lives with ATRX syndrome, one of less than 200 in the world afflicted. Today, on this 12th annual Rare Disease Day, I rise to celebrate his journey through life and his accomplishments, no matter how seemingly small. I'd also like to acknowledge the caregivers of those with rare diseases, including my sister-in-law Catherine and my brother-in-law Chris, who is a rare disease board member.
I applaud their sacrifices, resilience, and awareness-raising campaigns, despite constant and unforeseen challenges. Mr. Speaker, I call on all my colleagues and all Canadians to raise awareness of people with rare diseases, their caregivers, and those doing outreach work, today and every day of the year.
Well done.
Questions orales. Oral questions. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the former Attorney General confirmed that she was pressured by the Prime Minister's office, the Privy Council, and the Minister of Finance so that she would change her position on SNC-Lavalin's criminal trial. The Prime Minister simply cannot continue to govern now that Canadians know what he did. He must resign. When will he do so? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, the Prime Minister has said that he and his staff acted appropriately and professionally. Yesterday, we heard the former Attorney General confirm that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. We know that the Justice Committee members do their work. We know that the Conservatives will continue to act in a partisan fashion rather than focus on Canadian workers. All Prime Ministers must stand up for Canadian workers, and we are doing that.
Alors.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this question is for the Prime Minister, and he should have the decency to answer for himself. That's right. He says that there's a difference of opinion. Well, I'll ask him a very specific question. In a meeting with the Clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister, the former Attorney General said that the Clerk indicated that they had to find a solution quickly because, quote, there is a board meeting on Thursday with shareholders. Does the Prime Minister deny that these words were spoken? Yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Justice Committee is looking at this file. Once again, they have continued to call witnesses. Members of Parliament from both sides of the aisle are working together to have those witnesses appear. Yesterday, we heard from the former Attorney General. She confirmed that the Prime Minister, at all instances, confirmed that it was her decision to take. We know that committees are doing their work. Mr. Speaker, we also know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is also looking at this file. We also know that there are 2 ongoing court cases, Mr. Speaker. We on this side respect the work of committees. We respect the work of officers of Parliament. We respect the independence of the judicial system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. I remind the Government Member for Calgary, Midnapore, and others that each side will have their turn, and the time to listen is when they don't have the floor, which is now. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, these questions are for the Prime Minister, and he should have the guts to stand and answer for himself. He stands accused of political interference in a criminal case. And in one of those meetings, the Clerk of the Privy Council told the former Attorney General that this wasn't about jobs. This was about a shareholder meeting that was happening next Thursday, and that there was an election in Quebec soon. So once again, to the Prime Minister, did he hear those words spoken, yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians wanted to hear from the former Attorney General, and Mr. Speaker, Canadians got to hear from the former Attorney General. We on this side, we have confidence in the work that committees do. We know that members of Parliament from both sides sit on that committee. They have been able to have meetings. They are calling witnesses. Witnesses are appearing and answering those questions, Mr. Speaker. And it's important that witnesses be able to share their perspectives. We on this side, we respect that. And we on this side will fight for Canadian jobs. And perhaps if the Conservatives, rather than play partisan politics, focused on creating growth, they wouldn't have had the least growth since the worst growth since the Great Depression. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister shouldn't be hiding behind other members of his government. He should be answering for these questions himself. We did hear from the former Attorney General yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and now we want to hear from the Prime Minister, the man who stands accused of major political interference in a criminal case. Now, in one of the meetings between his staff and the former Attorney General, Matthew Bouchard said, quote, we can have the best policy in the world, but we need to be re-elected. Does the Prime Minister deny that those words were spoken? Yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, our government will always stand up for Canadian workers and the importance of the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, we have been clear since day one when it comes to the work of committees. This is the government under the leadership of this Prime Minister that increased resources to committees so that they could do their work, because they do very important work. The Conservatives will continue to undermine their work. The Conservatives are the party. Yes, they've chosen a new leader, but it's clear that it remains the party of Stephen Harper. They put out a rule book to undermine and destroy the work of committees. We on this side, Mr. Speaker, we will not do that. We will let the committee do their work. We will respect offices of Parliament as well.
Order. I remind members that the rules of order continue to apply. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is completely disgusting that the Prime Minister does not have the fortitude to answer these questions himself. I want to talk about respect for the rules, Mr. Speaker. I'll try another one on the Prime Minister. Gerald Butts, his principal secretary, said to the former Attorney General that, quote, the statute was set up by Harper, but that he does not like the law. So when the Liberals don't like the law, they try to break the law. The only job that the Prime Minister was interested in protecting was his own. Does he deny that Gerald Butts said those words, yes or no?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
We on on this side will remain focused on Canadians. The former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed every step of the way, and the former Attorney General confirmed that. The job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians and Canadian workers. Mr. Speaker, we on this side will keep investing in Canadians. We on this side will keep fighting for Canadian jobs, Mr. Speaker. That is what a government does. That is what a Prime Minister does. It's unfortunate that the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand that.
Order. The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Former Justice Ministers revealed the Prime Minister of Canada has coordinated a campaign of intimidation and interference against her to protect his partisan interests as the MP of Papineau. The Finance Minister attempted to interfere in the course of justice. The Clerk of the Privy Council delivered the threats. And Jerry Butts and Katie Telford said they weren't interested in what is legal. And the former Justice Minister referred to this Prime Minister as Richard Milhouse Nixon. So will the Prime Minister stop the ongoing smears against her and call an independent inquiry?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we know that the Justice Committee is looking at this file. We know that members from both sides of the aisle are working together to have witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing and responding to questions. We also know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking at this file. We on this side, we respect the work of officers of Parliament, and we think that the Commissioner should do their work. We also know on this side that it's the job of any Prime Minister to defend Canadian jobs. There was a time that the NDP used to fight for jobs and workers. Obviously, these days are gone. And Mr. Speaker, that member talks about providing advice. Where was his advice in December 2018 when he was making accusations?
The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Jobs. Job one of this Prime Minister is to be more ethical than Richard Nixon. So let's talk about the threats. Like when Michael Warnick said, quote, the Prime Minister is going to find a way to get this done, one way or the other. He's in that kind of mood, and I wanted you to be aware of that. And further, quote, you don't want to be on a collision course with this Prime Minister. And I asked her if she felt threatened. She said she wasn't threatened once in that meeting. She was threatened 3 times. It is not the role of the Clerk of the Privy Council to act as the personal goon of the Prime Minister. At the very least, will they call on Michael Warnick to step down today?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, when members such as that member start mischaracterizing witness testimony, it actually takes away from the debate and the level of discourse in this place. We know that the former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. We know that the former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts.
Order. I'm having difficulty hearing the answers. I should be able to hear them, and all members need to be able to hear both the questions and the answers. The Honourable Government House Leader has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed at every step of the way. The job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians and Canadian workers. Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we do on this side of the House.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Maskinonge. Mr. Speaker, yesterday people were shocked to hear the former Attorney General talk about inappropriate pressure put on her by the Prime Minister and his staff. The Prime Minister, the Chief of Staff, Principal Secretary, and 8 other individuals in senior positions. Inappropriate pressure several times. Repeatedly, she said no several times, and then she was fired. Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister willing to do anything at all if it means he's going to get a good deal for his rich, well-connected friends? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. The former Attorney General said that the Prime Minister told her that it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that the PMO staff said that they did not want anyone to act inappropriately. In the end, the Attorney General decided to not go ahead with that remediation agreement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member Mr. Speaker, people want the truth. They want the whole truth. After the former Attorney General's testimony, the Prime Minister said that he categorically disagreed with her testimony, but then he admitted that he hadn't taken the time to listen to it all. His story's changing once again. Canadians want the truth. The Prime Minister must tell them the truth. So my question is very simple. We need a public inquiry into the abuse of pressure on the part of the Prime Minister and his office. Will the Prime Minister allow a public inquiry to shed all the light and bring out all the truth? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we know that the members sitting on the Justice Committee are doing their work. We respect their work. We know that the Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter, and we have confidence in the Commissioner, and we have confidence in the fact that he can do his work. We must have confidence in our institutions. We know the Canadians have confidence in our institutions, and we'll let them do their work.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, Canadians were told by the former Attorney General that on September 17th, in relation to the SNC-Lavalin affair, the Prime Minister told her, and I quote, "There is an election in Quebec and I am an MP in Quebec, the member for Papineau." Does the Prime Minister deny saying this?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what we know is that the Justice Committee is actually doing their work. The Justice Committee is actually having witnesses appear and answering those questions. We also know that the former Attorney General confirmed that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. We also know that the former Attorney General confirmed that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. We also know that the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. We also know that the law was followed at every step. The job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians and Canadian workers. That's exactly what we do on this side of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Well, Opposition House Leader.
He doesn't deny it. Clearly, the former Attorney General is telling the truth. I have another question for the Prime Minister. Yesterday, the former Attorney General also testified that Mathieu Bouchard, a senior advisor in the Prime Minister's office, tried to pressure her in regards to the SNC-Lavalin deal by saying, and I quote, "We can have the best policy in the world, but we need to be re-elected," unquote. Again, does the Prime Minister deny that this was said?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Best policy in the world. The Prime Minister will always stand up for Canadian workers and the importance of the rule of law, Mr. Speaker. And Prime Ministers should fight for Canadian jobs. Absolutely. We on this side, we respect the work of committees. We have confidence in our institutions, as all Canadians should. What's clear is that the Conservatives will continue their partisan ways. They will put politics ahead of Canadians. We will not do that in this side, Mr. Speaker. We are fighting for Canadians, and we see the results. We know that Canadians are better off today than they were under Stephen Harper's Conservatives. The Conservatives have chosen a new leader, but it remains Stephen Harper's party of austerity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The Honourable Member for Charlevoix-Saint-Charles. Well, Mr. Speaker, they're not challenging what was just said, so that must mean they're admitting it. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General said, and I quote, "Various officials also urged me to take partisan political considerations into account, which was clearly improper for me to do so." End of quote. So, does the Prime Minister challenge her testimony? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we know that the members sitting on the Justice Committee are doing their work. They called for witnesses. Witnesses came. They answered questions. We know that the Conservatives continue their doublespeak. They say one thing in French, but they say something else in English. But Canadians will have a choice to make between our plan to invest in communities and grow the economy and support middle-class jobs and them, Stephen Harper's party, that wants to divide Canadians, has no plan for the economy or for jobs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Charlevoix-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the Justice Committee will be calling those 11 people that the former Attorney General named yesterday, and I hope that the Liberal members will accept to let them appear. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General also said, I'll start over. In response to the former Attorney General's testimony, the Prime Minister said he completely disagreed with her when she said that Jerry Bott said there is no solution that does not involve interference. Is the Prime Minister challenging what the former Attorney General said? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, it's important for Canadians to hear the former Attorney General at the Justice Committee. That's what she did. The members sitting on the committee do their work. They call for witnesses, and witnesses come. We on this side of the House respect the work of the members sitting on the Justice Committee. And we will not interfere like the Conservatives like to do. We know that the committee can do their work, and we trust in the work of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Chilliwack Hope.
Yesterday, the former Attorney General testified to the impact that the anonymous smear campaign had on her and her office, and we saw the Prime Minister come out and supposedly apologize for not speaking out sooner. Now we have the Liberal member for Mission Mascouy Fraser Canyon declaring that her statements yesterday were merely sour grapes and that that her father was pulling her strings. What disrespect to the former Attorney General. Is this the lines of the Liberal Party? Will they apologize for these sexist, misogynist comments?
Order. 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 I would ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues to come to order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side, we know that it is never acceptable for such comments to occur. We on this side respect the work of committees. We on this side respect the work of officers of Parliament. We on this side respect the independence of our judicial system, Mr. Speaker. We on this side recognize the importance of the issue. We recognize it's important that Canadians get to hear all different perspectives, Mr. Speaker. Committees are doing their work. They're doing their work. They're having witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing and answering those questions. We will not play the politics of division like the Conservatives will always continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister declared that the testimony of the former Attorney General was false before he had even seen it or read it. Now we have the Liberal member for Mission Mascouy Fraser Canyon sullying the name of this member, saying that it's just sour grapes and saying that it's her father, a respected chief in British Columbia, that is pulling the strings. This is absolutely unacceptable. It is beneath a member of Parliament who continues to laugh about this. Will the Prime Minister denounce it today?
The Honourable Government House Leader. Order.
Mr. Speaker, there is no place for misogyny or sexism. We know that's very much the case, Mr. Speaker, but I will remain focused on the issue. And I can assure that member that we will look into this matter. We take it very seriously. I take it very seriously. The Prime Minister takes it very seriously. When it comes to the matter before us, if we remain focused on the issue, we know that the former Attorney General was able to appear at committee. We know that the former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. We know that the former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts, and we know that at the end...
The Honourable Member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker, it has now been established that the Prime Minister's office put sustained political pressure on the former Attorney General. At least 11 individuals, including the Prime Minister, interfered at least 20 times. And why? For jobs? No. For the economy? No. The answer is disgusting. They were doing it for themselves. They were doing it for the Liberal Party of Canada. The advisor, Mathieu Bouchard, and the Prime Minister were very clear. It was just about getting re-elected. Will the Prime Minister put an end to his spin and admit that the only job he wants to save is the Honourable Government House Leader? Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House have looked at the facts. Canadians will be able to make their own choice. The former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her that it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General said that it was appropriate to discuss potential job impacts. And in the end, the former Attorney General decided not to proceed. The law was followed at each stage. Every Prime Minister has the responsibility to stand up for Canadians, including workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yesterday, we heard explosive testimony from the former Attorney General, and it directly involves the Prime Minister of Canada. And Canadians still haven't heard the whole story. The Prime Minister's not allowing the former Attorney General to discuss anything that happened after she was removed from her role. Yesterday, the Liberal majority on the Justice Committee voted no when I asked that she be able to tell us what happened after that date. Will the Prime Minister stop trying to save himself and remove the restrictions that he imposed on her so she can tell her entire story?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's important that Canadians be able to hear from witnesses, including the former Attorney General, Mr. Speaker. Members that sit on the Justice Committee work together, members from both sides, to ensure that witnesses are appearing, and witnesses are appearing and answering questions. Yesterday we heard the former Attorney General confirm that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed every step of the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we heard disturbing testimony from the former Attorney General of a coordinated campaign directed by the Prime Minister to obstruct justice. The former Attorney General has stated that there are communications relevant to getting to the heart of the truth that she can't speak of because the Prime Minister is silencing her. Enough is enough. It's time for the Prime Minister to immediately lift all solicitor-client privilege and all cabinet confidentiality. Why won't he?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, it was extremely important for the former Attorney General to come to the committee and to share her views on this important issue. Waiver of cabinet confidences and solicitor-client waiver is an exceptional form of relief, and it was provided here because all Canadians needed to hear the former Attorney General speak to this important issue. We want to assure Canadians that they are getting the answers to the information they are seeking. It is important for Canadians to hear the diverse perspectives on this matter.
Honourable Member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and top PMO officials repeatedly allowed political considerations to trump the rule of law. Gerald Butt said, quote, "There is no solution here that doesn't involve some interference," unquote. Katie Telford said, quote, "We don't want to debate legalities anymore," unquote. Shame. This is shocking. Canadians deserve to hear the full truth. So why doesn't the Prime Minister simply let her speak?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as was indicated in the House of Commons, the government's goal has been to allow the former minister to speak freely about the matters that relate to this issue that has been raised. The integrity of judicial proceedings is also a priority for our government. The waiver that has been provided does not cover any information shared by the Director of Public Prosecutions with the former Attorney General. That information is protected because 2 ongoing prosecutions are en route now.
Excellent answer.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-Lérable. Let's be clear. Canadians heard very troubling testimony yesterday. It was clear testimony that showed that there was consistent and sustained pressure by the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister to politically interfere in a criminal case. Mr. Speaker, clearly, we do not have all the information, and a significant part of the story is missing. I'm asking the Prime Minister, when will he waive all his privileges so that Canadians can hear the rest of this scandal? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
In this House, it was extremely important for the former Attorney General to be able to speak to the issues that are at hand. Waiver is an exceptional remedy, specifically when it relates to cabinet confidences and solicitor-client privilege. Every lawyer in this House who has a seat in this chamber knows that to be the case. The waiver was provided in this case so that the former Attorney General could speak to this issue and address the concerns of not just parliamentarians, but all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, well, clearly the Prime Minister is choosing whichever truth he chooses to believe. The Minister of Infrastructure has been repeating everywhere since yesterday evening that we should hear the testimony of the 11 other individuals that the Attorney General raised. He said those 11 people have something to say and he'd like to hear them. Well, Mr. Speaker, we agree with the Minister. Canadians have the right to know this version of the Liberal scandal. Can they tell us today when we will be able to hear from the Prime Minister, Gerald Butts, Katie Telford, Mathieu Bouchard, and the other individuals who put consistent and sustained pressure on the former Attorney General? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, as I said, on this side of the House, we have confidence in the members sitting on the Justice Committee. The Justice Committee does its work. It calls for witnesses. Witnesses come, and they answer the questions. Members on both sides of the House sit on that Justice Committee. We on this side of the House let them do their work. But obviously, the Conservatives like to interfere, and nothing has changed since Stephen Harper's days.
Bulkley Valley.
Hey, anyone still wonder why the Prime Minister made sure his last question period happened before the explosive testimony from the former Attorney General? Because I don't. Then the Prime Minister had the audacity to tell Canadians he rejected this damning and detailed testimony and then admitted that he hadn't actually listened to it all. Talk about arrogance. Talk about tone deaf. She told us of a consistent and sustained effort to politically interfere in a public prosecution. And a BC Liberal said that this was all sour grapes and she just wasn't a good team player. I guess being a good team Liberal player means willingness to break the law. When will they stop with the misogynistic smears and just agree to a public inquiry?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Justice Committee is looking at this file. We on this side of the House respect the work of committees, and that's why we increased resources for committees so that they could do their important work. There was a time where that member used to respect the work of committees in this place and our institutions. We also know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking at this file. We have confidence in our officers of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. All members should, all Canadians should as well. We also know that there's 2 court cases proceeding. We on this side have respect for the independence of the judicial system. I'd encourage all members to as well.
The Honourable Member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley.
The former Attorney General gave a detailed and devastating account of a relentless campaign to try and force her to break the law. The Prime Minister first said if the former Attorney General had a problem, she should have complained. Well, she did. And the bullying and the pressure and the veiled threats got worse. Then he said, well, she just should have quit. Well, thank God she didn't, because when she was there, she was standing up for the rule of law. Yesterday, Canadians watched a fearless and courageous Indigenous woman who stood up against the most powerful men in this country. When are the Liberals going to even have a scintilla of that courage to call for a full public inquiry?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yesterday, the former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. Mr. Speaker, the law was followed at every step of the way. The job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians, Canadian workers, and the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, it was important for Canadians to hear the testimony of the former Attorney General. The committee members made sure that that happened. Mr. Speaker, that member should stop putting words in other people's mouths. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for London North Centre. Order.
Mr. Speaker, our government has led the world in creating a special program for Yazidi and other survivors of Daesh and recognizing the genocide that was perpetrated against these communities. Even more so, countless Canadians and Londoners have welcomed victimized families and helped them find a new peace in Canada. Some Yazidi refugees have close members that they would like to see join them in this country. Can the Minister update this House on what the government is doing to facilitate family reunification for survivors of Daesh. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, I want to thank the member from London North Centre for his amazing advocacy on this issue. In fact, I joined him recently in London where we met members of the Yazidi community, and we heard firsthand not only their triumphs but also some of the challenges that they continue to face. We're very proud in this side of the House to offer protection to over 1,400 survivors of Daesh atrocities, and I'm happy to update this House that our government has taken the extra step of extending the one-year window to allow more Yazidis to sponsor their family members. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, instead of engaging in fear-mongering, we will stand up.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, in Canada, the law should be the same for the Prime Minister, just as it is for all Canadians. And no means no, both for the Prime Minister and for all Canadians. When the former Attorney General said no on several occasions, the Prime Minister and his team did not accept her response. And when she persisted in her decision, the Prime Minister simply pulled her from her job. When will the Prime Minister not understand that no means no from the former Attorney General? Mr. Speaker, it's important for Canadians that the Attorney General the former Attorney General, be able to express herself freely at the committee. She said that the Prime Minister told her the decision was up to her to make. The former Attorney General decided not to go forward. The legislation was respected, abided by at every stage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Granville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot today from the members opposite about letting the Justice Committee do their work, but the Liberals on that Justice Committee said that it was a witch hunt. It's absolutely unacceptable. This Prime Minister put his re-election above the judicial system when he cited the Quebec election and that he's an MP from Quebec when he pressured the former Attorney General to drop the criminal prosecution of SNC Lavalin. She said no. As former Ontario Liberal Attorney General said, interfering with a criminal prosecution is what despots do. Why did the Prime Minister put his personal political interests ahead of the integrity of our justice?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, once again, for the record, the Justice Committee is meeting. They've called witnesses. Witnesses are appearing, answering questions. There was a time not too long ago that the opposition were denying that the committee would ever meet. The committee is meeting. They were denying that witnesses wouldn't appear. Witnesses are appearing. They're answering. They were denying that the former Attorney General wouldn't be invited. She was invited. She appeared. They denied that the former Attorney General wouldn't be able to share her perspective, share her side. She appeared yesterday. She shared it. She confirmed that the Prime Minister at every step told her it was her decision to take. In the end,
the Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill. Order.
At the heart of the conversation on women's rights over the last year has been the need to believe women. Yesterday, the former Attorney General, presented evidence, texts and emails that show a campaign by the Prime Minister to intimidate her into politically influencing the outcome of a criminal corruption investigation. But the Prime Minister is saying that we shouldn't believe her or her evidence. Why is the Prime Minister telling Canadians that we should believe all women except his accusers?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, there's a clear difference between the way this Prime Minister and our government governs versus the approach of the previous government. We on this side respect the work of committees. We on this side respect the work of officers of Parliament. We on this side respect the independence of the judicial system. The Justice Committee members have asked for witnesses to appear. Witnesses are appearing, and they are providing answers. And it was important for Canadians that the former Attorney General be able to speak openly at the Justice Committee. The Prime Minister worked with the current Attorney General to ensure that solicitor-client privilege would be waived, as well as cabinet confidence.
Order. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
The Liberal lines on the mountain of evidence that were presented yesterday by the former Attorney General are, her dad is pulling her strings. Why didn't she say no more forcefully? Why didn't she report it sooner? She experienced it differently. You know, gaslighting a strong woman, especially one with a mountain of evidence at the behest of a fake feminist who, through his actions, uses women instead of supporting them, sets women back. Why aren't all women in that caucus and their so-called feminist allies calling for the Prime Minister's resignation?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side have confidence that the Justice Committee will have witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing, they are answering questions. Mr. Speaker, we on this side have confidence that they will be able to do that work. We on this side also know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We have confidence in our officers of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, we also know that there are 2 ongoing court cases. We on this side have respect and confidence in the independence of the judicial system. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on that side, no one is standing up for women. While Canadians are fighting for their jobs, this Prime Minister has been busy pressuring the former Attorney General to break the law for his rich corporate friends. Imagine if the PMO put all those efforts into standing up for working people. Instead, he invested time and energy into pressuring the AG to change her mind to help his rich corporate friends. This is about the choices the Liberals make. They won't fight for GM auto workers, they won't fight for steel and aluminum jobs, and they failed Sears pensioners. Why won't the Liberals just admit it? The middle class and those working hard to join it just don't matter to them.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would encourage that member to have more regard and respect for the former Attorney General's testimony yesterday. She confirmed that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed every step of the way, Mr. Speaker. The job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians and Canadian workers, and that's exactly what this Prime Minister did. We on this side have confidence in the work of committees. We know that witnesses will appear and answer.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, for months now, small businesses and workers in Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean have been living with uncertainty because of the tariffs on aluminum. The entire region is waiting for the Prime Minister to act, but nothing's changing. It seems he's too busy putting pressure on the former Attorney General rather than putting the pressure on Trump. When friends of the party call the Prime Minister's there, but workers have no direct line to his office, the Prime Minister, can he simply admit that he's never been on the side of Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, but he works for the friends of the party? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, these tariffs on steel and aluminum must be removed. This is the message we are sending to the United States. This message has been received. Congress people are asking for these tariffs to be lifted. This Monday, I raised this question directly with the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence.
For Carleton.
When the former Attorney General resigned in protest of political interference, the Prime Minister said he was, quote, both surprised and disappointed by her decision to step down. She said nothing of that to me, he said. But yesterday we learned that she said in September, "Are you politically interfering with my role, my decision as the Attorney General? I would strongly advise against it." Why did the Prime Minister tell Canadians the opposite of the truth?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been clear since the beginning that he and his staff always acted appropriately and professionally. Mr. Speaker, it was important for Canadians to be able to hear from the former Attorney General. Members on the Justice Committee have been working together, members from both sides, to have witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing. They are answering those questions. Canadians are able to hear that testimony, and it's important that they do. Our government will always focus on jobs, growing the middle class, and strengthening our economy. There were, of course, discussions about the potential loss of 9,000 jobs in communities across the country, including possible impact on pensions. It is a job of...
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, we now know that the only job the Prime Minister was interested in protecting was his own.
That's right.
Yesterday's testimony revealed that the Prime Minister looked Canadians in the eyes. And he said that the former Attorney General had never raised concerns about his political interference. We now learn that she did raise her concerns in September. If the Prime Minister does believe that her testimony under oath is false, will he show up to committee to refute it?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister in this House, as well as outside of this House, has said that it's important that Canadians be able to hear from witnesses, including the former Attorney General. The Prime Minister worked with the Attorney General, the current Attorney General, to ensure that solicitor-client privilege could be waived, as well as cabinet confidence. The former Attorney General yesterday in her testimony stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed every step of the way. Why can't that member accept that? Thank you.
Honourable Member for Carleton. Peter.
Well, it's clear that this Prime Minister would go to the moon to avoid answering questions on this issue. In fact, he has so far refused to summon the courage that yesterday the former Attorney General demonstrated when she came with copious notes, saved text messages, and other documentary evidence proving the veracity of her comments. She exposed a pattern of systematic political interference by the Prime Minister in a criminal prosecution. Will he show the same courage and show up and answer under oath?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it was important for Canadians to be able to hear from witnesses on this matter, including the former Attorney General. We know that the Justice Committee is doing their work. We on this side, we respect the work that committees do, and that's exactly why this government increased resources for them. We also know that the Commissioner, the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, is looking into this matter. We on this side, we respect our officers of Parliament. We also know that there's 2 ongoing court cases. We on this side respect the independence of our judicial system. It's unfortunately not the case for the Conservatives. Thank you.
I'd invite the member for Calgary Signal Hill not to interrupt when someone else has the floor.
The Honourable Member for Brossard-Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, whether it's satellite communication technology or the Canadarm, Canada contributes in a major way to space science and technology. When we invest in science, innovation and research, we promote economic growth, we create thousands of jobs, and we better understand our world. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation, Science and Development address this? Thank you. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for her excellent question. This morning, the Prime Minister was at Saint-Hubert to announce an investment of more than $2 billion in the Canadian Space Program. This is part of our historic partnership, Gateway partnership with NASA. They intend to return to the moon and prepare the way for a more in-depth exploration of Mars. This will provide our astronauts with new opportunities and our scientists with new cutting-edge technology.
The Honourable Member for Aurora Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Mr. Speaker, on September 17th, I left the Liberal Party because I had lost confidence in this Prime Minister. I know what it's like to trust the Prime Minister and have that trust broken. Canadians have had their trust in this Prime Minister broken. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern. Will this Prime Minister resign?
The Honourable Government House Leader. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that I ran for the Liberal Party because this Prime Minister had a plan. He had a plan for the economy. He had a plan for kids.
Absolutely.
And what's interesting, Mr. Speaker, every step of the way, the Conservatives voted against it. We brought forward the Canada Child Benefit, a tax-free benefit to help families with children that need the most. This week, it was confirmed that close to 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty. Over 800,000 Canadians are benefiting from this program. The Conservatives voted against it every single time. Over 800,000 jobs created by Canadians because of our investment. Conservatives.
The member for Saskatoon West. Order.
Mr. Speaker, on this day last year, every single Liberal member voted against my motion to create a national plan to end and prevent homelessness. This week they announced funding for urban Indigenous homelessness, but they have no idea where the money will go or when it will be spent. Instead of working on ending homelessness, the Prime Minister has been busy pressuring the former Attorney General to break the law for his corporate friends. When will he finally turn his attention to the real issues facing Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Social Development.
Very proud to be part of a government that has invested $5.7 billion into the National Housing Strategy. That money arrived in our first budget, and we are now spending $40 billion over the next 10 years. Every one of those programs is eligible to be subscribed to by Indigenous groups across this country. In fact, the $13.2 billion co-investment fund is building real housing for real people led by Indigenous communities as we speak. But there's an additional program that we've announced on top of that, which is the program to try and build more Indigenous housing off reserve. That program is now financed and is delivering real housing for real people. I only wish the NDP were as effective at building housing as they are at screaming.
Honourable member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam.
Mr. Speaker, over the past 2 weeks, I've heard from several constituents concerned about the outbreak of measles in Alberta and British Columbia. Well, measles was eliminated in Canada over 20 years ago. We know that outbreaks sometimes do occur. I would like to ask the Minister of Health, what is the most effective way to fight the measles?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, for the question and his passion for the health of Canadians.
Yes.
The answer is simple. The best way to fight the measles is by getting the measles vaccination. Vaccines are one of the most powerful public health tools we have, and they're the reason the measles were eliminated in Canada. Our government knows this, which is why we've committed $25 million over 5 years to get more Canadians vaccinated. The evidence is clear. Vaccines are safe, effective, and save lives.
Wow. Honourable member for Barrie, Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister coordinated a sustained effort to politically interfere in a criminal prosecution. He pressured the former Attorney General to end the trial of SNC Lavalin for political reasons. She refused, but he wouldn't take no for an answer. As the clerk said to the former Attorney General, the Prime Minister was going to get it done one way or another. The Prime Minister's lost the moral authority to govern this country. When will he resign?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, let's look at the facts. Yesterday at the Justice Committee, the former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. Yesterday at committee, the former Attorney General confirmed that she had made up her mind. In the end, the former Attorney General made the decision not to proceed. The law was followed every step of the way. Mr. Speaker, the job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians and Canadian workers. If the Conservatives spent half the time on Canadians rather than partisan politics, perhaps their record wouldn't show them having the worst growth since the Great Depression. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. Mr. Speaker, last evening the former Attorney General settled scores with PMO to the applause of New Democrats and Conservatives. No one seemed concerned with what was truly at stake. Why did she decide to sacrifice thousands of jobs in Canada and Quebec to stand up to her leader? Now that the Liberals have unleashed unholy hell in the SNC fiasco, what does the government intend to do to save the head office and the jobs of thousands of Quebecers? the Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, since the beginning, the Prime Minister has said that he and his staff acted in an appropriate, professional way. We care about jobs, the middle class, and the economy. There were discussions with respect to the possible loss of 9,000 jobs across the country, including the impact on pensions. We care about workers, and we are working for them. That is what our Prime Minister is doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Indigenous Services. The Minister will be aware that in my riding of Nunavut, there is not one mental health addictions treatment facility. The need for such a facility has been well documented and is exemplified by the highest rates of suicide in the nation and alcohol and drug addiction. The Government of Nunavut has recognized this need and has identified it as a priority. The previous minister stated in the House that she had heard the call for a treatment center and look forward to moving forward with this work. Will the minister commit to funding this much-needed center? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Speaker, and my heart goes out to the member opposite. You know, in my previous work, I worked extensively with people who are Indigenous and who suffer from mental health and addictions every single day. And we need to do more, and that's why our government is working closely to close the gap between health services for Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. To close that gap, we are investing in 52 new community-led mental wellness teams that are now serving over 344 communities. I will take the request from the member back to the new minister and make sure that he has an opportunity to meet with you at his first availability. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice from my heart to my friends in the Liberal Party. Do not dispute the truth of what our former Minister of Justice has said. Do not attempt to question or undermine or impugn her integrity. No one will believe them if they do. What they must do is tell the truth, let the chips fall where they may, starting with these 3 steps. Call for a public inquiry, release the former Minister of Justice from restrictions in her evidence, and fire the clerk of the Privy Council office.
Order. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, as we've always said, it was important for Canadians to be able to hear from witnesses, including the former Attorney General. We know that the Prime Minister worked with the current Attorney General to ensure that we could waive client solicitor privilege as well as cabinet confidence. Yesterday we saw that Canadians were able to hear directly from the former Attorney General. Canadians are able to watch the Justice Committee look at this file, look at witnesses appearing, and they answer. We recognize that the committee system is working because even that member yesterday was given the opportunity to ask questions directly of the witness. Mr. Speaker, we on this side have confidence in our institutions.
The Honourable Member for Hamilton Mountain is rising on a point of order.
Speaker, I'll be asking for consent of the House in a moment because I need to give some context to the matter in question and underscore just how serious it is. There are confirmed reports that earlier this week, the member for Hamilton East Stony Creek engaged in a behavior that could only be described as that of a bully toward a delegation of representatives from the United Steelworkers. So, Mr. Speaker, there have been consultations amongst the parties, and I sincerely hope that you will find unanimous consent to support the following motion. That the House condemn the inappropriate behavior of the member of the Hamilton East Stony Creek, who, according to reports, during a meeting with a delegation of representatives from the United Steelworkers from Hamilton, Ontario, A, verbally abused the delegation, B, attempted to physically intimidate them by striking various pieces of furniture and violently slamming his office door, C, insulted and disparaged the organization, including the retirees of Stelco Inc., and D, expelled them from his office, and that the House call on the member to give a full and public apology for his unacceptable and unparliamentary behavior.
Yeah.